My mother-in-law tried to control my marriage, so I finally snapped fire. She called him 20 times in 11 minutes. She guilt-tripped him at 3 a.m. She threatened to move back in unless he obeyed her. But one morning, everything changed. Watch what happens when manipulation meets truth, boundaries, and a wife who refuses to stay silent. Lies. A marriage fighting to survive. Would you stand up like she did, or let it destroy your relationship? Drop a comment below and tell us what you would do. Backhand index pointing down sparkles, don't miss the full story. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a drama-packed episode. I used to think I was a pretty reasonable person. I didn't expect a fairy tale wedding. I didn't need a castle or a carriage or doves flying into the sky like some dramatic movie ending. I just wanted one simple thing, for the wedding to feel like mine. But if you had walked into that church on my wedding day, you would have sworn it belonged to someone else. And honestly, it did. It belonged to Linda, my mother-in-law. People tell you to watch out for red flags before marriage, but no one ever teaches you what those red flags look like when the person waving them is family. It's easy to recognize a controlling boss or manipulative friend. It's much harder when the person smiling at you is the woman who raised the man you love. I first noticed something was off 6 months before the wedding. Daniel. And I had only been engaged for 2 weeks when Linda called me her daughter. It sounds sweet, right? Except it didn't feel sweet. It felt like a claim. Like she was pinning a name tag on me with her handwriting. She insisted on hosting an engagement dinner. I didn't mind until she chose a restaurant, wrote the guest list, and told me what to wear. She even sent me a photo of a dress and said, "This one is elegant but modest enough for the kind of woman marrying my son." I remember standing in my bedroom holding my phone, staring at that text. I had this tiny, uncomfortable twist in my stomach, one I ignored. I told myself she was just excited. I told myself she meant well. I told myself not to start a marriage with conflict. God, if I had only known what was coming. The real takeover started with the wedding dress. I found a dress I loved, simple lace, soft sleeves, nothing extravagant. My mom cried when she saw me in it. She said I looked like myself, and that mattered to me. I wanted to walk down the aisle as me, not some doll. But Linda hated it. She didn't say it outright. No, she was too strategic for that. She tilted her head, squinted her eyes, and gave this sweet but sharp smile. "It's lovely, dear, but it doesn't quite flatter your figure. We can find something better." She said it gently, like she was helping me, like she was protecting me from embarrassment. And Daniel, he just stood behind her, doing that nervous half-smile he always did when she took over conversation. I didn't realize it then, but that smile was a warning sign. A big one. A few days later, Linda sent me options she found online. They were nothing like what I liked. Ball gowns, heavy beading, overly sparkly, dramatic silhouettes that swallowed the body. Dresses chosen to make a statement. But not my statement. Hers. When I told her I'd already bought my dress, she said, "Oh, dear, we can return it." We, not you. That was the moment I felt the tiny hairline cracks in my identity, like she was slowly chiseling away my autonomy. But I wasn't prepared for what she did the next week. I walked into the wedding venue meeting expecting to see the decorations Daniel, and I chose soft whites, green eucalyptus, candles, simple elegance. Instead, the place looked like a royal blue explosion. Blue drapes, blue ribbons, blue flowers, blue tablecloths, even blue seat covers. And guess whose favorite color is blue? Linda's. I froze in the doorway. The wedding coordinator smiled and said, "Your mother-in-law told us the bride changed the color scheme." Bride, not groom's mother. I turned to Daniel, but he wouldn't look at me. He stared at the floor like a kid who got caught stealing candy. That's when I realized he didn't argue. He didn't defend me. He didn't stop her. He let it happen. I should have said something. I should have walked out. I should have created a scene or at least demanded answers. But instead, I swallowed everything and told myself, it's just one day. I'm marrying Daniel, not Linda. I can survive this. I didn't know that this was just the beginning. The day of the wedding. I didn't feel like a bride. I felt like a poorly paid actress in someone else's movie. When I walked into the bridal suite, the makeup artist told me she was doing a more mature look because Linda said it would balance my youthful features. Translation: I wasn't allowed to look the way I wanted. My bouquet wasn't the one I chose. The ceremony music wasn't the one Daniel and I picked. Even the guest list was different. She added 27 people I'd never met. When they opened the doors for me to walk down the aisle, I froze for a split second because every shade of blue in that room screamed Linda. I felt like she was a bride, and I was the stand-in. But the moment that broke me wasn't any of that. It was a reception when the MC announced, "Now, welcoming the woman who made this entire day possible, Linda." And the crowd cheered. They actually cheered. Linda strutted in like a queen while I stood in the corner, smiling through my teeth because I didn't want to ruin the night. For people congratulated her before they congratulated me. One woman even said, "You must be so proud of how beautiful your wedding turned out." Your wedding. Not mine. Not Daniel's. Hers. That night, when we finally got home, I burst into tears. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my dress, makeup ruined, hair half fallen, bouquet wilting in my lap. Daniel walked in and looked exhausted, like he had survived a battle. "Babe," I whispered, "why didn't you stop her?" He rubbed his hands over his face and said, She wanted to help." Help? Help? She didn't help. She controlled. She replaced. She took over everything that mattered to me. But Daniel didn't see it. Or maybe he did, but he was too afraid to admit it. Too afraid to confront her. That night, lying next to my new husband, listening to him breathe evenly while I stayed awake staring at the ceiling, I had my first terrifying thought. I didn't just marry Daniel. I married Linda too. And she had no intention of letting me forget it. I wish I could say things got better after the wedding. I wish I could tell you that once the pictures were taken and the decorations were packed away, life finally felt like ours. But the truth is, the wedding was only the rehearsal. The real performance, Linda's performance, began after the honeymoon. Daniel and I had planned to take a week-long road trip, just the two of us. Quiet towns, small cafes, long drives, hotel breakfasts, soft morning light. It was supposed to be our reset button after a chaotic wedding season. I needed that time more than anything. But on the morning we were supposed to leave, Daniel's phone buzzed. It was Linda. And the next thing I knew, Daniel was pacing around the room, rubbing his forehead the same way he always did when she said something he didn't want to tell me. What did she say? My voice was calm, but my chest already felt tight. He exhaled slowly. She said she's had this anxiety ever since we left the reception. She wants us to stop by before we leave, just for a few minutes. A few minutes. Every terrible story starts with a few minutes. I didn't want to go, but I also didn't want to be the villain in the first week of our marriage. So I swallowed the discomfort again and said, "Fine, but just a short visit, Daniel. Please." He nodded, relieved. But the moment we walked into her house, I knew we had walked into a trap. Linda was sitting on the couch, tissues in hand, eyes red like she'd been crying. When she saw Daniel, she stood up shakily like she was on the verge of collapsing. She didn't even greet me. She went straight to him, grabbed his arm, and said, "Honey, I'm so glad you came. I barely slept. I kept thinking, what if something happened to you on the road? What if I never saw you again?" Her voice wavered with perfect fragility. I would have believed her if I hadn't seen her quickly glance at me with dry, calculating eyes. Daniel hugged her. Too long, too tightly, too protectively. My stomach twisted. We stayed for a few minutes that turned into 3 hours. She kept bringing up stories from Daniel's childhood, reminiscing, showing photos, making tea, fussing over him. She asked endless questions about our honeymoon plans and always found something passive-aggressive to say. A long road trip? That's exhausting. Daniel needs rest after working so hard. Hotels? Are you sure they're safe? Crime is high these days. Driving so far? What if the car breaks down? What if there's an accident? Every sentence started like concern, but ended like sabotage. By the second hour, I realized what she wanted. She wanted Daniel to cancel the trip. And unfortunately, she got what she wanted. Daniel finally turned to me and said, "Maybe we should stay just this once. Just this once." Those words would follow me for years. I nodded. Because I was tired, because I didn't want to fight, because I felt trapped between being a good wife and being swallowed by a new family that wasn't mine. And that's how I started my marriage. Not on a honeymoon, not making memories with my husband, but sitting in his mother's living room, watching my life shrink. The next few months were worse. Linda had keys to our house, not because I gave them to her, but because Daniel did just for emergencies. She showed up unannounced almost every weekend. Sometimes she brought groceries, sometimes homemade food, but often she brought opinions and instructions and rules. Rules about how Daniel liked his shirts folded. Rules about what spices upset Daniel's stomach. Rules about how the dishwasher should be loaded, how the living room should be arranged, how Daniel's work shirts should be hung. Rules that Daniel didn't even remember making. I wasn't building a home with my husband. I was maintaining Linda's museum exhibit of Daniel's childhood. The worst part? Daniel didn't see it. He said she was just being helpful. He said she meant well. He said I was overreacting. And every time he said that, something inside me cracked a little more. But then came the first real battle. A battle over a room. We had a second bedroom in our new house. I wanted to make it my home office. I work in digital design, and I needed a space to breathe, think, and create. But the moment Linda saw the room, she said, "Oh, perfect. This will be the nursery." Nursery? Daniel. And I had barely been married for 4 months. We hadn't even settled into a normal routine. We weren't trying for a baby. I laughed awkwardly. "Oh, actually, I'm turning this into my office." Linda tilted her head, gave that same sweet, sharp smile I hated, and said, "Of course you want a little hobby room, but Daniel needs children, and soon." Daniel, not we. Daniel. I looked at him, waiting for him to correct her, waiting for him to say something. Anything. He said nothing. I stood there, heart pounding, feeling like a stranger in my own house. Linda walked into the room, opened the closet, inspected the walls, and said, "We'll paint it soft yellow. Gender neutral. I'll send samples." I spoke firmly this time. "Linda, this is my office. I need this room for work." She turned, smiled politely, and said, "We'll discuss it later, dear." But I said, "There's nothing to discuss." Her smile faded, and for the first time, I saw what lived behind her gentle facade. Not love, not concern, not maternal warmth. Control, possessiveness, territorial sharpness. Something cold. She looked at me with a stare that made my skin prickle. Then she said quietly, "Don't push me out of Daniel's life. You won't win. You won't win. Not this isn't fair. Not let's compromise. Not I'm worried." She framed it like a war she intended to win. When she left, Daniel turned to me with frustration. "Why did you talk to her like that? You embarrassed her." I felt my throat close. I embarrassed her? Daniel. She's trying to control everything, even our future kids. He shook his head. "You're making a big deal out of nothing." Nothing. My boundaries were nothing. My dreams were nothing. My voice was nothing. That night, we barely spoke. I lay awake for hours again, staring at the same ceiling I stared at after our wedding. The same sinking feeling pooling in my chest. I didn't feel married. I felt invaded. And the worst part? Every time I tried to talk to Daniel, the same pattern followed. I'd express my concerns. He'd defend her. She'd deny everything. I'd be painted as dramatic. And I kept thinking, if this was year 1, what would year 5 look like? The breaking point came the day Linda showed up with paint cans. Just walked in, no knock, no call. Daniel wasn't even home. She set the cans on the floor of my office and said, "Let's get started on the nursery." I stared at the shiny yellow paint. My hands shook. "Take it back," I told her quietly. She laughed. "You're overreacting again." But I wasn't overreacting. I was breaking. Linda, I'm asking you to leave. She crossed her arms. No. I took a step closer, my voice steady. Leave. Now. Something shifted in her eyes. She grabbed the paint can, marched toward the door, and hissed, "This isn't over." And she was right. It was only beginning. Because that evening, when Daniel came home, Linda had already texted him a completely different version of what happened. Suddenly I was aggressive. I was disrespectful. I insulted her. I threw her out. Daniel didn't ask what really happened. He didn't give me a chance. He yelled. For the first time in our marriage, he yelled. And in that moment, while he defended the woman occupying my marriage, I realized something devastating. I wasn't fighting Linda. I was fighting both of them. And I didn't know how much longer I could continue surviving in a marriage that didn't feel like mine. Something broke inside me the night Daniel yelled. Not because of the volume, not because of the anger, but because I finally understood something I had been trying to deny. He wasn't fighting for me. He was fighting for his mother. After that night, our home wasn't the same. We didn't argue every day, but the silence that settled between us was heavier than any shouting match. It seeped into our routines, our meals, our moments of rest. We still lived together. We still slept in the same bed. We still looked like a married couple from the outside. But the truth? We had become emotional roommates. And Linda, she knew it. About a week later, the real explosion happened. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was cooking a simple lunch, pan-seared chicken, vegetables, nothing fancy. The house was quiet except for the gentle sounds of the kitchen. Daniel was in the living room scrolling through sports highlights. For a moment, it almost felt normal, until I heard keys in the front door. The door opened, and Linda walked straight inside. She didn't even acknowledge that this was my home, too. She greeted Daniel first, as always, with a bright smile and open arms, like she was stepping into her living room. "Daniel, I brought you the supplements you forgot last weekend." He stood up immediately, grabbed a bag from her, hugged her tightly. She didn't greet me, not even a nod. I forced a polite smile anyway. "Hello, Linda." She glanced at me briefly. "Cooking again? That smell is a bit strong." Every word out of her mouth had a sting hidden inside it. Daniel didn't notice. He never did. Linda settled onto the couch and made herself comfortable, crossing her legs and examining the house like she was inspecting something she owned. After a few minutes, she said, "Daniel, darling, are you drinking enough water? You always forget to hydrate. I can see it in your skin." He chuckled. "Mom, I'm fine." She reached out and touched his cheek. "My poor baby works too hard." I froze at the stove. Baby. Poor baby. That one word made something inside me simmer. He wasn't her baby anymore. He was my husband. But no matter how much I tried to remind myself that, Linda behaved like she was the one Daniel had exchanged vows with. When lunch was ready, we sat at the table. I served the plates quietly, trying to keep peace. When I placed Daniel's food in front of him, Linda leaned forward and said, "Oh, don't give him too much salt. You know it's not good for his blood pressure." I held my breath. "Linda," I said gently, "this is how Daniel likes it." She tilted her head at me with that patronizing little smile. "Dear, I've known Daniel for 33 years. Trust me, I know how he likes his food." That was the moment something snapped. "And I'm his wife." I said firmly, "You need to respect that." The table went silent. Daniel stared at me in shock. Linda blinked slowly like she couldn't believe I dared speak back. She put down her fork, straightened her blouse, and said in a sweet, poisonous voice, "I think the problem, dear, is that you don't understand the dynamic of this family yet. The dynamic of this family. Not our family. This family," meaning the one she controlled. She continued, "A good wife knows how to support the bond between a mother and her son. You seem to forget your place sometimes." My place. Those words hit me in the chest like a stone. I swallowed hard and said quietly, "I haven't forgotten anything. But this is our home. Daniel and I make decisions together. Not you." Her face hardened, like stone, like ice, like she had been waiting for this moment. She turned to Daniel. Are you going to let her speak to me like that? And Daniel, God, he hesitated. He looked between us like a man being forced to choose between two burning buildings, one he was born in and one he built himself. Then, with a heavy sigh, he said, Can we please not do this? He didn't say I was right. He didn't say she was crossing boundaries. He didn't offend me. He just wanted silence. But silence, as I had already learned, only protected one person. And it wasn't me. Linda leaned back smugly, her point proven. My heart twisted painfully. I stood up from the table. I'm done eating. Enjoy your meal. I wasn't crying yet, but my chin trembled. I walked to our bedroom and closed the door quietly. Not slam, quietly. Because even in my suffering, I didn't want to be dramatic. I didn't want to give Linda ammunition. But the moment the door clicked shut, I broke. I sat on the edge of the bed, buried my face in my hands, and finally let the tears fall. I cried for everything I had been holding inside. The suffocation, the feeling of being erased, the way I had been shrinking piece by piece ever since the wedding. And worst of all, I cried because I realized I had lost Daniel long before I even noticed. 10 minutes later, Daniel knocked on the door. Can I come in? I wiped my face and forced my voice steady. Yes. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. He looked uncomfortable, frustrated, torn. Babe, why did you talk to her like that? I stared at him in disbelief. Daniel, she insulted me. In our house. He rubbed his forehead. She didn't insult you. She was just concerned. I laughed, bitter, exhausted. Concerned? Daniel, she undermines everything I do. She treats me like a visitor. She acts like you're her husband, not mine. And you let her. He looked at me as if the accusation was too big, too heavy. She's my mother, and I'm your wife. The air between us felt sharp. Daniel sat on the bed, elbows on his knees, and said softly, I don't know how to make you both get along. My voice cracked. It's not about getting along. It's about boundaries. And you won't set any. He didn't respond. He didn't have to. His silence was the answer. That night, I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling, feeling that familiar tightness in my chest. The same heaviness I felt after the wedding, after the honeymoon cancellation, after the office incident. I kept replaying Linda's words. You won't win. And I wondered if she was right. Because how do you win against a woman whose only weapon is the love of the man you're married to? How do you compete with someone who spent decades being the center of his world? I wasn't asking Daniel to choose between us. I was begging him to choose us. But it felt like I was losing a battle I never wanted to fight, against a woman who saw me as an intruder in a life she believed belonged to her. And as I closed my eyes that night, I felt the faint, terrifying whisper of a thought I never believed I would have. What if this marriage wasn't built for two? What if it was always going to be the three of us? For a few weeks after the List incident, things in the house were uneasy but quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. Silence that felt like a stretched rubber band about to snap. Robert was still trying to play the role of mediator, which only made me feel like he would try to smooth over a mess instead of fixing it. And Margaret? She went back to acting like the queen of the house, but now there was something different in her eyes. I don't know how else to describe it except she wasn't trying to hide her intentions anymore. Before, she used to mask everything with politeness, guilt-tripping, or motherly concern. But ever since I stood up for myself, she started moving differently, almost like she knew the game was changing. And she didn't like losing control. One morning, I woke up early to make pancakes. It was something my mom taught me when I was little, and it always reminded me of home. I set the table nicely. Fruit bowl, little jug of warm syrup, whipped butter. The kind of breakfast that makes the house feel warm. Robert came down first. He smelled the pancakes and smiled with his eyes half closed. Smells amazing, he said, kissing my cheek before sitting down. For a moment, it felt normal again, comfortable, hopeful. But then we heard her footsteps on the stairs. Margaret walked into the kitchen wearing that expression. The one she had whenever she was preparing to cause drama, but pretend she wasn't. Her eyes went straight to the table. Oh, she said in a tone dripping with meaning. I didn't know we were having this kind of breakfast. I glanced at Robert, confused. Pancakes? What's wrong with pancakes? What do you mean? I asked. Margaret lifted one eyebrow like she pitted me. Well, it's just that Robert never liked sweet breakfast growing up. He prefers savory. You know, real food. I blinked. Robert had literally asked for my pancakes on our second date. He'd eaten them at least 50 times since then. Robert cleared his throat. Mom, I like pancakes. She sighed dramatically, as if he was a child refusing to tell the truth. Robert, honey, you used to complain about them all the time. I had to force you to finish them. Don't you remember? I stared at her. She stared at him. And in that moment, something strange happened. Robert hesitated, almost like he was questioning his own memory, because hers was louder. I felt a tightness in my chest. Robert, I said softly, do you like pancakes? He looked at me and then at her, and then back at me again. Yes, he said firmly. I like your pancakes. I've always liked them. Margaret's jaw tightened so subtly you'd miss it if you weren't staring at her. Oh, well, people change, I suppose. She sat down. She didn't touch the food. We started eating quietly. Then Margaret sighed again, loud, dramatic, theatrical. I ignored it. Robert ignored it. So she tried again. You know, she said to me, you can always tell when someone didn't grow up in a household with structure. My fork froze halfway in my mouth. Robert stiffened. What does that mean? He asked. Margaret smiled sweetly. That fake, sugar-coated smile she used right before saying something meant to sting. Just that some people learn cooking and cleaning very late in life. And it shows. I put my fork down, slowly. Margaret, what exactly are you trying to say? She shrugged lightly. Oh, nothing. Just that some families teach discipline and standards, while others, well, she waved her hand dismissively. They raise children who do everything their way, not the correct way. There it was, the insult she'd been circling around for months. She thought I wasn't good enough for her son because I wasn't raised the way she wanted. I felt heat rise in my face, not from embarrassment, but anger. Margaret, I said, keeping my voice calm, my family taught me kindness, effort, and respect. That seems like structure to me. She tilted her head with a condescending smile. Oh, sweetie, effort is good, but standards are better. Robert slammed his fork down. Mom, that's enough. She looked offended. Her, offended. I'm only trying to help your wife. She should be thankful I'm teaching her things. I took a breath, then another. Then I spoke. I don't need you to teach me anything, Margaret. This is our home, our marriage, our life. You don't get to correct me like I'm your child. Her smile vanished, completely. Her eyes turned cold, truly cold for the first time, and she said words I'll never forget. Well, perhaps you shouldn't try so hard to act like the woman of the house and actually become one. Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. Robert stood up so quickly his chair scraped against the floor. That's it. Mom, upstairs. Now. I sat stunned. Margaret looked shocked, furious, but she went with him. And as I sat at the table alone, staring at the pancakes, I suddenly didn't want any more. I finally understood. This wasn't going to stop. Not unless something major changed. Not unless I changed. For the first time, I wondered if living with his mother had been a mistake we might not bounce back from. I stayed downstairs for a long time after Robert marched his mother upstairs. Long enough for the pancakes to go cold. Long enough for the house to feel like it was holding its breath. I didn't hear what they were saying, but every few minutes a muffled voice rose, then fell, then rose again. I don't know if you've ever sat alone in your own home feeling like a stranger, but that's exactly how it felt. Like I was intruding in a life I was supposed to belong to. Finally, after what felt like an hour, I heard their footsteps on the stairs. Robert came down first. His face was flushed, his eyes tight, like he'd been arguing for a while. Margaret followed slowly, with a stiff posture of someone who felt insulted, but wanted to pretend she wasn't. No one spoke for several seconds. Robert rubbed his forehead and exhaled heavily. "She's going to stay at my aunt's place for a while," he said, his voice drained. "I told her it's not working here." I swallowed. He was choosing me. But the disappointment on his face didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss. "She's leaving today?" I asked quietly. He nodded. "In a few hours." Margaret didn't look at me. Not once. She walked right past me to her room, her shoulders rigid, her expression unreadable. I should have felt relieved. Instead, all I felt was the weight of everything that had been piled on top of us for months, and the sinking feeling that this wasn't the end. It was a pause. When Margaret's door closed, Robert collapsed into the dining chair and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. He looked exhausted, emotionally wiped. I sat across from him, searching his face. "Did she say anything?" I asked softly. He hesitated. Then he said, "She thinks you're trying to turn me against her." My chest tightened, even though I'd expected that answer. "And what do you think?" I asked. He looked up, meeting my eyes. "I think," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "that I've allowed her to interfere too much. I should have set boundaries earlier. I should have protected you more." I blinked hard, because that meant more to me than he realized. But then he added something that tightened the air again. "She's still my mom. I love her. I don't want to lose her completely." My stomach dropped slightly, not because he was wrong, but because the truth is, that's exactly how MILs wedge themselves between couples. Guilt, loyalty, history. "I'm not asking you to lose her," I said, "just to keep our marriage ours, not hers." He nodded, but the heaviness on his face didn't go away. A few hours later, I heard her dragging her suitcases down the hallway. Robert went to help, but she refused. "I can do it," she said sharply. Her voice was calm but cold, the kind of cold that isn't emotional. It's strategic. She walked past me toward the front door, didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge me. Robert held the door open for her. She stepped out, then finally turned around and stared directly at me. Her expression was strangely calm, almost too calm. Then she said very quietly, "You may have won this round, but you forget one thing." She leaned forward slightly. "He's my son. He'll always come back to me." The words hit like ice water. Not loud, not dramatic, but dangerous. I didn't answer. I just watched her walk down the steps and get into the car. Robert closed the door after her, then stood there in silence for a long time. When he finally turned to me, he whispered, "I'm sorry." And for the first time since the wedding, I realized just how broken everything had become. For the next week, the house felt different, lighter, but also unsettled. Robert was quieter, not cold, just overwhelmed. It was clear he was wrestling with everything inside him: his loyalty to his mother, his responsibility to me, his guilt for not balancing it better. Every night, I'd lie in bed next to him, listening to his breathing change as he drifted in and out of sleep, wondering, was he regretting sending her away? Was he angry at me? Or was he angry at himself? But the worst part was what happened on day 7. It was late, almost midnight. We were in bed, the room dim, just the soft yellow glow of the bedside lamp. Robert's phone buzzed. He reached for it. As soon as he saw the caller ID, his whole body tensed. I didn't need to see the screen to know who it was. He answered. "Mom." His mother's voice was loud enough that even I could hear her muffled through the phone. She sounded upset, her tone frantic, but not the real kind, the manipulative kind. "Robert, I don't feel well. I think something's wrong. Can you come?" Robert sat up straight. "Mom, what's going on? Did you call an ambulance?" "No," she cried. "I don't want strangers in the house. I just need you. Please, Robbie." Robbie. She only used that name when she wanted something. Robert looked at me, his eyes torn, conflicted. "Can you stay here?" I asked quietly. He hesitated. Then he stood up. "I have to check on her. I'll be back soon." My chest tightened. "Robert, don't let her pull you back in like before." "I'm not," he said quickly. "She just sounds scared. I'll be back." But the look on his face told me he was already slipping into old patterns. He grabbed his jacket, and then he was out the door. Soon turned into 2 hours, then 3, then 4. I sat on the couch staring at the door, feeling each minute deep in the sinking feeling in my stomach. At 4:13 a.m., I finally heard the key turn. Robert walked in. He looked tired, defeated, but also strangely distant. "Is she okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. He sighed heavily. She said she was dizzy, but when I got there, she was fine. Fine. Just fine. I closed my eyes. Of course she was. Of course she'd faked it. Robert sat down next to me, rubbing his temples. "I don't know what to do," he whispered. She kept saying she felt alone, that we abandoned her. I felt something sharp twist in my chest. "Robert, we didn't abandon her. We created boundaries." He didn't answer, and for the first time, I felt something I had never felt before in our marriage. Fear. Fear that Margaret wasn't done. Fear that she was planning something bigger. Fear that she knew exactly how to manipulate him. And fear that she might actually succeed. The next morning, Robert slept like a man who had run a marathon in his mind. But I didn't sleep at all. His mother had created the perfect opening. A fake emergency. A late-night guilt trip. A performance disguised as vulnerability. And the worst part? It worked. Not because Robert was weak, but because he was raised to be responsible for her emotions. Children of manipulative parents rarely realize it. They grow up believing that love means protecting the parent's feelings at all costs. Even as adults. Even when they have a spouse. Even when it destroys their new family. So that morning, while Robert breathed heavily beside me, I sat on the edge of the bed and said one thing to myself. This is not going to end unless I end it. Not with screaming. Not with attacking. Not with ultimatums. But with truth. While Robert showered, I went downstairs to make coffee. His phone sat on the counter. I wasn't trying to snoop. But when the screen lit up, I saw something that hit me like a slap. 20 missed calls, Margaret. 20. All between 7 a.m. and 7:18 a.m. Who calls someone 20 times in 11 minutes? Someone who wants to break them. Someone who wants to wear down their resolve. Someone who wants to remind the entire world. I come first. I didn't unlock his phone. I didn't check the messages. But the fact that she called that many times, hours after pulling him out of bed at 3 a.m., told me everything. She wasn't sick. She was escalating. And manipulators escalate when they're losing control. 30 minutes later, as we were eating breakfast in silence, his phone rang again. Her name flashed across the screen. Robert froze. I said nothing. He hesitated, then answered. "Mom." Her voice filled the quiet room, loud, sharp, dramatic. "Robert, I need you to come again. The dizziness is back. I don't feel right." I watched Robert swallow. I watched the guilt rise. Then, without thinking, I mouthed the words. Put on speaker. He hesitated. Then, he pressed a button. Margaret's voice blasted through the kitchen. "Robert, are you there? I don't know if I'll make it today. My chest feels tight. My legs are numb. Everything is spinning." He cut in gently. "Mom, did you call a doctor?" "No." She snapped. "Why would I bother them when I have you? You're my son. Your wife doesn't understand." I felt heat rise in my chest. Robert's jaw clenched. "Mom," he said firmly, "don't talk about her like that." Silence. Then a scoff. A low, bitter one. "Look how she's changed you." My son would never speak to me that way. My stomach dropped. This wasn't poisoning him. This was brainwashing. And if I didn't cut this cycle, our marriage would sink under the weight of her expectations. Robert ended the call after promising to check on her later. When he set the phone on the table, he looked like he had aged 5 years. Hours passed. Robert left to bring groceries to his mother just to be safe. I stayed home. I cleaned. I tried to distract myself. I tried to breathe. But part of me knew Margaret wasn't sick. She was gathering ammunition. At 6 p.m., Robert came home looking defeated. He didn't even take off his shoes. He just sat on the couch and stared at the wall. I sat beside him. Did something happen? He didn't answer at first. Then he whispered, She said she might move back in. My blood went cold. What? I said, quietly. He rubbed his face with both hands. She said she doesn't feel safe living alone. She said she feels abandoned. She said she needs me close. I stared at him, at the exhaustion in his eyes, at the weight on his shoulders, at the fear that if he pushed back, he'd lose her. Then he said something that shook me. She said, if I don't let her move back, she'll cut me off completely. It was like a knife twisting. This wasn't a mother. This was a puppeteer. I whispered, and what did you tell her? He closed his eyes. I told her I'd think about it. My heart cracked, but I didn't yell. I didn't lash out. Instead, I said one sentence, the sentence that changed everything. If she moves back in, I won't stay. He opened his eyes sharply, not angry, shocked, and that's when the tears hit him. He broke. He started crying. The deep, painful kind someone cries when they finally realize they're trapped between two worlds, the one they were born into and the one they built with someone they love. I gently held his hand, not to force a choice, but to remind him that I was here, and that he had something worth fighting for. Later that evening, he walked into our bedroom, stood in the doorway, and said, I'm going back tomorrow, not to help her, to tell her the truth. My heart pounded. What truth? That we need space, that she can't live with us, that she needs to stop manipulating me, and that if she keeps pushing, she will lose me because of her own behavior. I stared at him, not fully believing it. He didn't stop. And I want you to come with me. My throat tightened, because that wasn't just confrontation. That was war. She opened the door before we knocked, as if she'd been standing there listening for our footsteps. Her smile fell the moment she saw me beside him. Oh, you brought her. Her. Not my name. Not your wife. Just her. Robert didn't let her continue. Mom, we need to talk. The temperature in the room dropped. She crossed her arms. Her expression turned cold. And without blinking, she said, then send her outside. This is between us. Robert shook his head. No, this is between all of us. And that was the moment, the exact moment, I saw her mask crack. A tiny flicker, fear, anger, disbelief, all tangled together. She knew she was losing control, and she wasn't going down quietly. I started going to therapy alone. At first, I wasn't sure talking to a stranger would help, but it did. Session after session, I learned things I hadn't realized before. How toxic parent-child relationships can quietly take over a marriage, how emotional manipulation works, and why someone like Daniel might not even recognize it himself. That boundaries are not mean, they are necessary. By the end of the month, one thought hit me like lightning. I can't just fix this by being patient or silent. I have to confront both Daniel and his mother. We went to Linda's house. My stomach churned, but I forced myself to breathe. Linda, I said, voice firm, we need to talk. This control, this intrusion into our lives. It has to stop. Daniel froze beside me, like he'd never heard his own voice speak that way before. I laid it all out, the loss of my autonomy, the disrespect and constant criticism, the way her presence made our home feel unsafe. Linda's face twisted with shock, then anger. She exploded, yelling, accusing, trying to turn Daniel against me. But I didn't back down. I didn't flinch. I spoke the truth. For the first time with no filter, no apologies. I moved out temporarily, not to punish Daniel, but to protect my peace. For the first time, Daniel saw the gravity of the situation. He realized his mother's control had almost cost him his marriage. He began therapy, too. Slowly, he started recognizing patterns he'd ignored for years. The man I married, the one buried under guilt and manipulation, was beginning to reemerge. One evening, Daniel finally confronted his mother alone. His voice shook, but he spoke clearly. Mom, this ends now. I won't let you control me or my marriage. You can't manipulate me anymore. Linda screamed, swore, tried to guilt him, but he held firm. For the first time in his life, he set boundaries. She stormed out his life, vowing revenge, but Daniel didn't look back. He was free. Daniel and I reconnected. Slowly, we talked honestly about the past, our fears, and our grief. We made new rules. Privacy is sacred. Communication comes first. Always. Boundaries are non-negotiable. We didn't rush. Healing isn't linear. But for the first time in years, our marriage felt like a partnership, not a battlefield. Linda tried one final manipulation, spreading lies to extended family, showing up uninvited at our home. Daniel didn't flinch. "I've already chosen," he said firmly. "Our marriage comes first. You've had your chance." Linda left. This time, there was no power left to take from us. We moved to a new home, far away from the chaos. New city, new life, new peace. Linda could no longer interfere. The threats, the guilt, the manipulation, they were behind us. For the first time in years, our home was ours alone. We began dreaming of the future, a family built on respect, love, and boundaries. We promised ourselves that if we had children one day, they would grow up feeling safe, heard, and valued, not controlled or manipulated like Daniel once was. I pulled out the journal I'd kept, the one I wrote in the day I finally snapped. Reading it, I remember the fear, the exhaustion, and the moment I realized I deserved peace. We deserved peace. I had spoken truth. We had set boundaries. And together, Daniel and I had reclaimed our lives. Sometimes strength isn't loud. It isn't explosive. It's standing firm, speaking the truth, and refusing to let someone else write your story. And in that moment, I knew we were finally free. Speech balloon, what's your story? Have you ever been caught in a mother-in-law saga like this? Or faced someone trying to control your marriage or personal life? We want to hear from you. Share your experience in the comments below. We read every single one and love learning from your stories. Backhand index pointing down. If this story moved you, please give a like and share it with friends or family who might relate. Your support helps us bring more real-life stories like this to everyone. Sparkles, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a drama-packed episode filled with truth, lessons, and emotional twists. More stories like this are coming, and you won't want to miss a single one.